Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for being with us, both online and in room. My name is Steve Baer. I'm the planning supervisor for the statewide regional planning section. And we're here this evening for the Coastal Corridor Study Stakeholder Meeting number 2. I'll do a little bit of introductory material that we do with all of our public meetings and presentations, and then turn it over to our consultant team and some other members. We have a direct agenda, but don't be fooled. There is a lot of work we'll be reviewing this evening, a little over 100 slides, but we're going to keep it moving. First, our mission statement. Every trip, every mode, every dollar, and every one. This illustrates our comprehensive systems approach to planning and providing transportation infrastructure. Next, again, a slide that we use in all of our public meetings and presentations. This is our safety slide. It was updated this morning, and the slide's a little bit complex, but basically we look back 2 years between 23 and 24 and compare the figures that we're seeing year to date for 25. As you can see, we are observing considerable reductions in accidents and overall improvements in transportation safety. Next is our safe system approach slide. The text is a little bit small, but for context, it begins with the premise: death and serious injuries are unacceptable. Overall, this visual illustrates that the transportation industry generally, and DelDOT specifically, is moving to a proactive approach to safety. That's all for the introductory materials. I'll now turn things over to Andrew, and he'll begin the presentation. Andrew.
Thank you, Steve. Good afternoon, everyone. Again, Andrew Bing. I facilitate the Stakeholder study meetings as well as the tag meetings. It's good to see you in the room, and I can't see everyone online, but I'll trust that you are there and listening. So I'm just going to go through some introductory slides, get us started, and review a little information from our last meeting, and then turn it over to other members of the team to go into the presentation. I will do my best to kind of keep us moving, but the whole purpose of these meetings is to engage with you all, to get questions, to hear what you have to say. So we want to try to find a good balance for that. Just a couple reminders. So we do have our members of our Coastal Corridors Monitoring Committee and our Transportation Advisory Group for Milton. You all are welcome to ask questions. If you're here as a member of the public, whether in person or joining us remotely, we ask that you just sort of be in listen mode. You're here to observe. We certainly are happy you're here. If you have any comments, we'll take those at the end of the meeting. Okay, so not during the meeting. If any of our members do have any questions, who are virtual, use the raise the hand feature to let us know you'd like to jump in. We'll get to you as quickly as we can. And as I said, we'll take member comments or questions at the end of the meeting. So we do have our project team. Steve already mentioned the consultant team. More importantly, we have our real partners here, which is the Delaware Department of Transportation, obviously DelDOT, the Office of State Planning Coordination, as well as Sussex County Planning and Zoning Department. So this is very much a partnership between the state and the county. I'm not going to have people jump on to introduce themselves. I think it would just take a little too much time. So I'm just going to pause on each of these slides to give people a sense of who are on each of the different committees. So for the Coastal Corridors Monitoring Committee, you see about 10 names there first. And I'll go to a few more. So a broad group representing the county, as well as the different towns and various institutional interests, business interests, farming interests, and so forth. And then our Milton Transportation Advisory Group. See names there, council members, planning and zoning, fire, and so forth, Delaware Greenways. Continuing on with other representatives there. So nice group here for this second stakeholder meeting. We're looking forward to kind of getting going. So what are kind of the role for each of the stakeholders? So for both groups, we're looking for you to help us set project priorities. Again, you're going to hear me say you're going to get a lot of information today, but we're looking for your help in digesting that information, relating the information back to kind of your area of expertise, and helping us then move this forward by setting our project priorities, promoting recommendations from earlier project phases, We have a number of different recommendations. We're looking for you all to help us try to advocate and promote and get those recommendations moving. Work together to find solutions to the various transportation challenges that we have, and help support communication between decision makers, the community, and other interested stakeholders. That's a really important role. You guys are conduits, if you will, liaisons to larger groups of people out there, and we're looking for you to help communicate what you're hearing back and forth, both back to the community and then bringing us what you're hearing from your various constituents. In terms of today, I'm hoping most of you have either attended the first meeting or were able to review the information. What we're looking to do for the second meeting is continue to share data insights that support the coastal corridor study and related efforts. There will not be any lack of information that we will present to you today. But not more importantly, but we want to really try to emphasize, we want to hear what you have to say in terms of community priorities, trade-offs, and next steps for the different corridor studies that we'll be advancing, as well as understanding how partner initiatives, such as land use, policy, collaboration. So you also have state strategies for policies and spending. You have the recently completed Sussex County Land Use Reform Working Group and the recommendations that they put forth. To understand how those different initiatives connect with and can be informed by our coastal corridors work. So I'm glad I keep hearing the dinging going off. That means people are joining us. That's a positive sound. I've got 4 kids. I'm used to any distraction you can throw. Anyway, I'm going to turn it over to Leah to move forward with the presentation.
Good to see you all. So this little timeline we have up on the screen, firstly, it references a lot of the other initiatives underway that Andrew just alluded to. So we see there the statewide freight plan, work that DART is doing around transit throughout the state, including Sussex County, the land use piece, state strategies. So rest assured, we are taking all of that into account and into our process. And above, you'll see kind of 2 pieces of analysis we've been doing. Last time we met, 2 weeks back, we did really focus on that regional and system level analysis, wanting to understand how the transportation network works as a whole, and also identify how our individual corridors we've been looking at, specifically Route 16, 9, and 24 are what's going on there. And we're taking all of that data and we want to refine it and use it for those corridor specific solutions. So we're about in the middle of that process now. Today, you're going to hear a little bit more about some potential solutions we have that work for the network as a whole and how we can bring that information and apply it to our corridors that we know are having some issues today and in future. So that will move into specific on the ground recommendations. We are not there yet though. We're still in the data analysis piece. So, and Andrew, this may have been the slide you were looking for, our challenges, right? All of this is hard to do, right? Because predicting the future, not a given. Things are going to change, and we're only going to be able to take an educated guess, but that is what we hope this data will provide. All of us in leadership roles, many of you in the room, our colleagues at DelDOT. We also know increasingly our resources are limited, so we cannot throw infinite funds at the problem. We have to be very targeted about where we make investments. We have to be very careful about how we prioritize those investments. And also, we have a variety of community goals. We'll talk about that today. We talked about that last time we met. And some traditional approaches to transportation planning 15, 20, 30 years ago maybe aren't going to achieve those goals. So we need to pay attention to that. And also, we don't all share the same goals. So we have a lot of diverse needs. We have a very diverse population, and we're all going to have to collaborate together. No one's going to knock it out of the park with all wins. We're all going to have to give and take a little, and we want to understand those trade-offs before we make decisions. So with that, I'm going to provide a really high-level recap of our meeting 2 weeks ago. Just so you know, that full recording of that meeting is posted on the Coastal Corridors website along with the slide deck. So if you feel like you want to go back and review some of the materials, it is there. So we reviewed our approach. So last meeting was really focused on how we assessed risks. Today we'll be really delving into our potential solutions and in future applying those findings to our corridor study. So looking at our risks, we really wanted to understand how the transportation system works today. How will it work in the future? We picked the year 2050 to explore that. Where are needs most urgent? Where are they most likely? We showed a lot of maps and a lot of data to point to those things. And we also evaluated all of those issues with the lens of the priorities that we've heard from you all over the past couple of years. So those being safety, alleviating traffic congestion, looking at some multimodal solutions. So how can we use transit, walking, and biking to address some of these issues? Flying towards economic development, of course. We want to keep our small businesses thriving. Social and health and environment. Now today, we'll be getting more into those potential solutions. We want to make sure we're chasing down the right ideas and assessing how those ideas work relative to one another. So although we'll be kind of contemplating actual transportation network potential solutions, there's other pieces of this puzzle. We talked about that a lot last time as it relates to land use, other policy decisions and programs and such. So more on that to come. Now, so here's our stakeholder priorities on the left side of the screen. And last time we met, we went through this chart. So those of you in the room who can't quite read all those slides, you do have printouts in front of you. So looking at those priorities and the icons, we evaluated some risks. So where is network efficiency being impeded? So where are we seeing traffic congestion? And we measured that by looking at where roads are over capacity. And you see, we also scored them from 0 to 2.4. You can see row by row the measures we worked through during our last meeting. We also looked at priority corridors, which we had defined as freight routes and areas that have, excuse me, evacuation routes. We also looked at locations that are higher density corridors where speeding and volume may be an issue. That might be candidates for more multimodal improvements. So think about 16 through Milton, where there may need to be more needs for crossing. And we looked at candidate main streets for that. And we also looked at locations where there's a lot of high fatal crashes or injury crashes. And we measured that by looking at high crash locations. So those are all of the things we reviewed last time together. And we scored the entire road network in the study area and added all those scores together. So each of those rows was given a score of 0 to 2 with a maximum possible score of 10. So if you're curious how each of those individual maps turned out, I encourage you to look at 2 weeks ago's presentation online. But it culminated in what we are calling a combined risk score for the 2050 transportation network. So what this map reflects is locations where, firstly, the score was 4 or higher, and also locations that are an issue in the summertime and the off-season. So even during the school year, when the tourists are not here in force, we're still having issues on these parts of the road network. And regardless of how land use progresses. So one other thing we looked at was different land use scenarios. The standard land use scenario essentially is doing what we've been doing now. We looked at a more compact scenario of looking at focusing growth in around areas that are already developed, and a more sprawling scenario. So what happens if we have more development spread further afield? Even with that layered on, these roadway segments are problematic for all of those measures we talked about. So not just congestion. I know when I look at this map, I'm like, oh, that's where traffic is. It's not just congestion. That's just one of 6 measures. It's also the flooding piece, all those other priorities. So we also talked high level about potential solutions for what we can do to address all these risks. Advancing projects and programs to improve roadway safety, and that is the top priority for the department. We want to increase available transportation options. If someone doesn't have to get in a car to get to their destination, that's one less car contributing to crash risk, contributing to traffic, etc. We want to expand network connectivity and capacity where appropriate. So how can we better connect our developments and our communities and our neighborhoods with destinations? Having one way in and out of the development isn't a well-connected development, things like that. We also want to continue our work with Sussex County as they advance the next comprehensive plan, which they intend to get started in 2026, right around the corner. and the land use reform working group recommendations. Our area municipalities, some of you are on the room, and I know a number of you are online, and Delaware Transit Corporation, DART, as well. So Andrew is going to speak to some of what we heard from you all last time we met.
Yeah, so at the last meeting, we had some poll questions, some opportunities for you all to directly engage in some questions that we posed to you. So the first one was, what word or words describe your vision for the regional transportation system? So we have a whole word cloud there. I'm not going to read all of those. You can kind of see what they are. You can see some of the bigger ones in there that maybe were mentioned more often: safe, smooth, functional, flow, multimodal, planned, and so forth. So a lot of different terminology, but gives you a sense of what people are saying. So going on to the next question, where we had some rankings and priorities. Please rank the performance measures in order of their importance to you and your organization. So we had 6 listed, and then others. First was safety. Second was multimodal improvements. Third was alleviate traffic congestion, and then environment and resiliency, economic development, social and health. And then again, we had another category. When you then bring it over to which results are most concerning to you, please rank in order of priority. Overcapacity came in first there, with crashes second. Higher motor vehicle speeds, volumes along candidate main streets, priority corridors, evacuation routes, priority corridors, freight routes, and then flooding. So, when you ask the question a little differently, you get slightly different responses. That's what we heard from you all. In terms of the next one, please rank the performance measures. Wait a second now.
Did I get that? I think you're
Got the same slide.
okay.
We'll go on to the next one. Okay, in terms of some other feedback that we heard throughout the meeting, transportation issues we should clarify, emphasize, or add to the public workshop presentation potentially. We heard some comments regarding rail and transit as a solution. East-west limited access highway, certainly a lot of what we're doing on the coastal corridors has been looking at that. Bike trail, rail trail system, the impact of bike ped system connectivity, such as across US 1 near the beaches. The impact maps to make it easier to understand, make it less overwhelming, so try to zoom in, localize that information. How does DelDOT model future load changes at a regional level or over a time interval? Looking for maybe more nuance or clarity on the flood risk. DelDOT should use capacity versus traffic volume, not just level of service in land use planning, and how to coordinate future growth and road improvements. So, as we will mention this, we've mentioned before that we have our public workshop on December 2nd. Once we kind of get through this meeting and get feedback from you all, we'll start finalizing our information for the workshop, and we'll definitely try to incorporate as much of your input as we can. So I'll turn it back to Leah.
One of the big things, as Andrew shared, we heard last time was an interest in transit. Our presentation materials were largely silent on that issue. So we did touch base with our colleagues. Thank you for joining us online, Jared from DART, to get an update from them on what they're up to. Because I don't want you all to think there's not a lot going on in the transit space in Sussex County. So we've listed here some of the near-term and long-term recommendations that they are working on in Sussex County. For example, one we've heard about a lot is providing direct service between Milton and Lewis, for example. So that are underway now, as well as another new route between Seaford and Dover, some other modifications to existing routes. So a lot of stuff is in the works now for that, and longer term, even looking at additional service on 9 between Georgetown and Lewis. One of the big picture ideas we talked about last time was rail. And as many of you know, there is a Diamond State Rail study underway. So we talked a little bit about light rail and bus rapid transit and some of the challenges with that in a low density area like much of our study area in Sussex County is. So that is all underway, and there is potential in future as DART advances some of those ideas to integrate some of the data they have into our model. We've not done it yet. It's not a good time for that yet, just because we don't have the data we would need, but that is definitely something we would like to collaborate with DART with in the future. But we did want to note one thing, which is transit does work best with denser land use, right? You need that density of population to set a bus stop for a fixed route, because you're going to have people who can walk or bike to the bus stop to get on it, as opposed to having to have a park and ride, or et cetera. So today, when we do talk a little bit about those land use scenarios and some of the different things we calculated, that is a general statement we can make about moving forward with transit improvements and how it relates to the work we're exploring. So we also introduced, last time we met, this like cyclical chart, really wanting to emphasize there's a real relationship between land use and transportation, right? We can't talk about roadway improvements without understanding where people live, where they work, where they play. And that in Delaware is governed by our local governments and our county governments. They set the zoning, they set where those people are. Now, trips people take, that's on them, right? People pick where they're going to go to the grocery, where they get a job, all of that, how they get there by mode. But Delaware does create options on what feels safe to choose, whether you're driving, walking, biking, etc. And then the network. So DelDOT is responsible for the how you travel in some ways, because it's providing choice, as well as where the transportation network is and what it consists of. And what the model, so that travel demand model and all the maps that we're going to view in a moment, do is kind of taking assumptions about where people live based on data we get from the county, from our municipalities and zoning, data we get from the Delaware Population Consortium on growth, and kind of bakes that into the DelDOT model. Now, when things change in the future, that makes it a little tricky, right? If one thing grows too much, say the road network grows, that is going to dictate where people live, because the commute might be faster, et cetera. So also there on the side, you see some different words: policy, projects, programs, and partnerships. Again, that is just to emphasize, one roadway widening project is not going to address the cycle holistically. It needs to be a suite of solutions. So when we talk about what that means, there are some solutions in the land use side of things. So again, that gets back to our comp plan, that zoning, our working group, land use reform working group recommendations, our ongoing collaboration there. On the orange side of the screen, the DelDOT side, we are eventually talking about projects that might be built. Many are underway now. We're just beginning to contemplate what projects may come out of this effort. We want to improve our available options. We want to improve network connectivity and expand capacity, but we only want to do that where it's appropriate to do so. And that's what we're trying to figure out right now. So last time we met, we also shared this map depicting potential mitigation concepts. So we are looking at some new regional connectors. We are looking at some potential roadway widenings, and having collaborated extensively with Milton, at least one location in our study area where we want to make the street a little friendlier for people walking and biking and getting around other than a car. We're calling that a Main Street treatment. So the mapping we showed during meeting one really established the existing needs in these areas, and we're going to be using some of the same methods to evaluate the concepts on the map today and get to a little bit more detailed version of this map. And really, the results are informing the highlighted things on this slide. So we're not going to be able to answer questions in all of the potential solutions, but it will directly contribute to a number of them. With that, we are going to transition into our mitigation strategies. And before we get into the weeds, we are going to, I love that our presentation features a glossary, right? That's always a good sign. But we did want to make sure everyone understands what we're talking about when we use some of our jargon. So stakeholder priorities. We already spent some time talking about that. That one's pretty straightforward. It's what we heard from you all and your neighbors during our public engagement processes over the past 5+ years. And we use those priorities to guide our scoring methodology and our evaluation measures. Now, when we say potential solutions, that's the universe of all those P's. It includes policy changes. It includes program changes, it includes partnerships, it includes projects. It's a very broad term. However, when we talk about mitigation concepts, that's when we're talking more about potential infrastructure changes. So mitigation concepts are roadway widening, there's regional connectors in that main street. And you'll see today, we bundled these ideas into different strategies. We call them blue, red, and green. It's really going to be exciting to see what we came up with. And for each of those strategies, we score them. So the same way we scored the existing network and the 2050 network last time we met, we will be applying the same criteria to these mitigation concepts to see how they score, because we want to know if they work or not, and what they do solve, and how well they potentially work to address the priorities you all have. So again, it all ties back to this chart. The scoring is the same kind of set of criteria. So now I do want to add some caveats before we show the lines on a map. We developed these routes to explore solutions. The lines you're about to see on the next slide do not represent projects. They do not exist yet as a thing that is actually getting built. It's just exploratory, because we want to answer some questions. We want to know, is widening a roadway, taking a road from 2 to 4 lanes or 3 to 4 lanes, going to be something that's going to work for the community? Could other changes to the transportation system address the same concerns? Again, could a regional connector work better than widening or not? What are the trade-offs between those two options? Now, anytime we widen a road or build a new connection, that's going to impact property. It's going to impact people's, way they get to work. It has a lot of impacts. So the routing we selected is just to explore these ideas. It does not represent a project. Also, we did select it though to minimize impact to the extent possible, both environmental impact, property impacts, and use existing roadways where possible. And finally, the model does not account for non-motorized changes. So most of the results you're seeing today speak to motor vehicle impacts. Now in future, we probably can get more into, once we have some more ideas, we can get more into walking, biking, transit, but right now we're not quite there yet.
Leah, I'm gonna just jump in, just because I think sometimes a voice change helps get people's attention again. We have been very deliberate about making clear that the things you are about to see on the screen are not planned or programmed projects. We have that line of text on every slide, map slide moving forward, because we do not want the information we're about to share with you all to be taken out of context, to be misrepresented. The things you are going to see on the slides are not programmed projects. There is no funding assigned to anything you see moving forward on the next slides. Our capital transportation program is where you will see funding assigned for projects. Things you see on the slides coming up are not projects in the capital transportation program. So we've been very deliberate about that. We are hoping you all can help us in ensuring that things you may see shared online are not taken out of context or misrepresented. So just wanted to add that again, reiterate that point.
Thank you, Austin, for that clarification. So,
I have a question.
oh, sure.
Sorry.
Could you read your name for folks online?
My name is Richard Trask. I'm from Milton Planning and Zoning. I understand these alternate routes that you're conceptualizing here, but to quantify those optional routes, would you have to know where the traffic on the individual routes go? For instance, Route 9, how much of the traffic on Route 9 ends up in Milton? Or how much of the traffic on Route 16 ends up down on Route 9 at Five Corners?
Correct.
How do you quantify that?
Yeah.
Because if you can't, then you assume that every route has the same amount of distribution.
So that is exactly the power of the model. It tells us that. So that is also why we are looking at the entire network as a whole. Because if we were just looking at one of these roads in isolation and saying, okay, this is the volume now on Route 9. We're going to just take Route 9 and we're going to make it wider for all the way from Route 1 to Georgetown. And just look at that road in isolation. That's not enough. We wholly agree, which is why essentially the limits of the extents of the map you see It's a dynamic system, and Ben's going to be able to really speak to this when he shares his maps. But the results you see in the outputs basically allow us to envision, okay, if this route is made more attractive by these improvements or this extra lane, it's going to assign more trips that way. It's going to be more attractive to our little imaginary drivers and imaginary cars in the computer that choose new routes. So that is, in fact, why we've taken the approach we have to address that very concern.
See, I can see, for instance, if you knew ahead of time or had a concept ahead of time of the amount of traffic that is traveling, let's say westbound on Route 9, how much of that traffic is going up to Milton, then you can figure out the amount of density that benefits on the rest of Route 9 as it goes west, for instance.
It's a really, really good point, and I encourage you to keep all of these ideas in mind as we move forward. So our lines on the map here, if I could walk you all through the specific ideas we came up with. First and foremost, in blue at the top there, that Main Street treatment in Milton. No surprises there about where that's located or its limits. That's a lot of meetings have been had about that idea already. And what we wanted to do is make sure that if we do create a more bike and pedestrian friendly environment there, that we're not creating a new problem, a new traffic snarl. So the model helps us make sure that we're not creating a bigger problem than we can solve. So for that reason, we also wanted to explore some potential connectors in the vicinity. So perhaps less through traffic would choose to drive through what will be more of a downtown environment on 16 through Milton. They could go around on those two northern routes. One of them is a little bit longer, one a little bit shorter. Both are designed to kind of get volume vehicles through traffic around town. We also show there a southern connector that is labeled 16/9 connector. And that kind of diagonal route reflects something we learned in phase 1 of the study, which is that a lot of the traffic originating towards Ellendale coming in on 16, their end destination is to the southeast down towards the beaches. So a lot of folks right now are already turning right onto 30 to head south and wiggle their way over via a variety of roads towards Lewis and 5 Points. We also, so that kind of diagonal works for both, gives a little bit of benefit potentially to both 9 and 16. The final regional connector is the one kind of right above Route 9. You can see there. And one thing we know is the intersection of 9 at 5 is the worst intersection in the study area from a performance standpoint. It has a lot of issues from a congestion standpoint. It also has a cemetery on one corner, a bridge and on one approach, and a lot of constraints that mean widening the road there is going to be problematic. So is there a way we could kind of avoid that intersection but still have some more capacity? So that's what that 9C alignment looks at. And finally, we are looking at our widenings as well. So we have a long and short scenario for Route 9. So that's essentially how far west. You all know DelDOT, many of you probably know DelDOT is already widening the easternmost portion of Route 9 coming west from 5 Points. And the question is, how far should that continue? So we looked at 2 scenarios, one through Route 5 and one all the way to Park Avenue. And then looking south to 24, there's really not an option for a workaround there. So really we'd be looking at, due to the proximity of the water and some other things. So really looking at just widening scenarios. Again, a short widening scenario to Indian Mission Road and a longer one to Oak Orchard. I will note those connectors are assumed to be 2 travel lanes. So we're not talking about blowing out a limited access highway. That is not what these are. It is just improving capacity in other ways, with the exception of that diagonal route, which we did look at for travel lanes along. And that was just because of some of the preliminary results from the model. So that the others are assumed to be 2 travel lanes.
All right.
You remember our polls from last time? Good more.
So again, if you're in the room, you can scan that QR code or go to through the web there, the pollev.com/goldpine173. So, and if you're on virtually, you can do the same thing. I'm going to give everyone a chance to get on there. So I'll,
That same link will work for the duration of the meeting. So if you pull it up in a browser on your phone, it'll automatically update when we have a new question. So again, this is a drag and drop.
so while people are doing, I'm going to read the question. So which regional connector mitigation concept are you most interested to learn about? So again, this isn't like, what do you think's going to work best or something like that. It's just more, what are you most interested to kind of get more information about? The first one is 16C short, SR16 shorter northern connector, 16C long, SR16 longer northern connector, 9-C US 9 connector, avoid US 9 and SR5 constraints, and then 16-9C SR16 southern connector, which avoids 16 kind of main street.
That was really a mouthful.
Yeah.
For that
So
very reason, those of you in the room do have a handout that has all of these mapped and listed for your reference. And those of you who are online, there was a PDF distributed to you right before the meeting that also has these shown. Because as we go through the slides today, I thought it would be really useful to have that as a place to look and make sure you recall what we're talking about here.
So again, these are focused on the regional connectors, and we're looking for you to rank these. So I'll give another few seconds here so people can do that.
And these results will dynamically update as you all input.
So it looks like right now, no, not anymore. There we go. The 16-9.
That diagonal one.
Yep. The SR16 southern connector, and then 9C US 9 connector, which avoids the US 9 and SR5. And then we have the 16C long, SR16 long northern connector, and then the shorter connector. And again, this is just purely a popularity contest, if you will, of asking which ones you all are most interested in. We're going to go to the next question, which focuses on the widening mitigation concept. So which widening mitigation concept are you most interested to learn about? Again, ranking the 4 options that we give you. US 9 widening to Park Avenue, US 9 shorter widening to SR5, the SR24 longer widening to Oak Orchard, or the SR24 shorter widening to Indian Mission. Again, most interested in learning about. If you could take a couple seconds and rank those. Okay, so in terms of, I still see a little movement on there. So it looks like the US 9 widening to Park Avenue, 24 longer, late breaking news here. So the US 9 widening to Park Avenue, then the US 9 shorter widening to SR5, then the 24 longer widening to Oak Orchard, and then the 24 shorter widening to Indian Mission. So again, trying to break up a little of the presentation by having some poll questions, getting your input. We appreciate that. We're going to continue on, and I'll come back with a couple other poll questions in a little bit.
Thanks for your feedback, everyone. Oh, I see a question from Scott Collins. Scott, if you want to unmute yourself and.
Yeah, hi. Quick question. I know you mentioned limited access highway wasn't an option for several of these, but it seems like maybe the 16 to 9 connector, maybe that would actually be an option. And I'm wondering if that wouldn't. One thing I'm concerned about is the promotion of more sprawl, and moving tourists and workers from point A to point B more quickly is definitely appealing, but creating additional places where subdivisions will be built by right is not so interesting.
That's a great point, Scott. Thank you. And I think one of the challenges when we are attempting to make roadway improvements in an area that, although not very developed, is developed, is, we cannot be creating a total wall for people who live out in these areas already, right? So I definitely think we can contemplate how a limited access highway on that alignment could work. But our preliminary conversations, it's just a little bit tricky to maintain the connectivity we need, right? One of the other pieces of this is wanting more options and resilient options, such that if one road is totally congested, folks have another outlet. Some of those kind of redundancy principles, which would not be reflected by limited access. But we'll definitely note that, and our team can take a little bit of a deeper look for you.
All right, thank you.
Okay. All right. So when we talked about our glossary, I alluded to this. So obviously, saw quite a number of options, and again, limited resources. I don't think we can build them all, especially when the widenings and the connectors are attempting to address some of the same problems. So what we did was grouped some of these projects into, some of these mitigation concepts into 3 different strategies. Just gave them arbitrary labels of blue, red, and green. And again, we just wanted to understand, are there other options to enhance the system other than widening? And we combined projects based on what we thought would address those stakeholder priorities. We wanted the combinations to be distinct, likely to generate different outcomes, and also stay within a reasonable cost range. So little highlighted note at the bottom there. Again, we're not saying that one of these strategies as a whole is going to progress. It's just a tool for evaluation. So again, similarly to our caveat about not a programmed or funded project at all. Also, this package is not a definitive direction. It just gives us a little bit of a tool to explore things. So on the screen, you'll see what we decided to combine for the purposes of analysis. So our blue scenario takes that longer 16 regional connector. Well, firstly, all 3 include the Main Street 16 concepts in Milton. That is a priority for the town leadership that has been worked through and is critical to keeping folks safe and walking in and around 16 and traveling by their modes. So that is consistent across all 3 of these. But the blue scenario does take a look at that northern, longer regional connector for 16, and the longer, or the Route 9 connector as well, just north of Route 9, and the short widening scenario for 24. The red scenario, or the red strategy, takes a look at that diagonal concept that I think most of you are interested in learning a little bit more about. That kind of functions as a connector for both 16 and 9, connecting diagonally between the 2, and the long widening scenario on 24. And finally, the green strategy looks at the shorter 16 connector and the short widening for 9 and 24. So basically, these are the combinations of projects we took and applied to all of the same evaluation criteria we did when we met last time. So again, have a series of maps here that kind of emphasize each strategy just for your reference, so you have a little bit of a zoomed in view. Also noted here is the extents of the corridor studies that DelDOT is advancing right now concurrent with this. So just so keep in mind what is formally a part of that process and where we will be documenting recommendations, the limits of that in blue. And you'll see there on the map that caveat we talked about earlier. Just want to clarify again, these are not funded projects. We're just evaluating. So again, the blue, red, and green. So now we need to understand how they all perform. So for that, I'm going to ask my colleague Ben to join us and walk us through even more maps than last time, I think.
Hi folks, good to be with you again. We will walk through as Leah said, and I'll just add just another little tidbit about the blue and the red here. They both have those 9C or the 16/9 connectors, and I would say just to note on the eastern end of each of them where they join 9, there's a stretch there that we're sort of saying we would have a widening of 9, 4 lanes from there to where the CTP project that's programmed for widening east of there ends. So just a little bit of widening involved with that connector project to note.
Mitigation concept.
Mitigation concept, yes. Thank you, Austin. Keep me on track, please. So returning to these risk scores from last time, Leah reviewed them a bit. I just wanted to say that partly off of the conversation we had and some of the insights we were getting out of these divergent measures, we were feeling like maybe that combined risk maybe muddles things a little bit, and we wanted to have simple measure and combine some things, but we also didn't want to just combine them all. So we created these sort of themed risk scores, taking the first two, the peak capacity score and the priority corridor scores, which are loosely, both kind of around capacity concerns, and created a combined capacity score. And then we created a combined community score, that theme entailing the flooding roadways, the Main Street candidate scores, and the scores. So with this, I think, it kind of harkens back to some of the discussion last time where we were saying that sometimes when you add capacity and you increase speeds, especially when it's not peak hour and you've got a big old roadway and you've got what feels like an open highway, people speed well over the speed limit, and that can add safety risks. So while they're not necessarily opposed to each other, some of these metrics can go in different ways. And I think that doing this kind of simple view of combining some things helps tease out some of that in the story with evaluating these different mitigation concepts.
Great. Yes, I'm going to do a couple more poll questions here. Again, Ben just spoke to community measures versus the capacity measures. So the first question is, if you had a guess, always great, you're doing a study, we're asking you to guess, but we're just trying to get some input and see what you're thinking. Which strategy do you think will perform the best based when evaluated using community measures? So as Ben just said, the crash score, Main Street candidate score, and flooding score. So do you think the blue scenario, mitigation strategy, the red, or the green? So blue, red, green, ranking, I guess selecting. Okay, so we'll probably still get a few more inputs here, but it looks pretty clear. About 2/3 of the people who are responding, a little less now. 57% think blue, red at about 36%, and green at 7%. And now conversely, we'll go to the next question.
These are crowdsourced models.
So if you had to guess, which strategy you think will perform best when evaluated using the capacity measures, so priority corridor score and capacity score? Again, the same three options: blue, red, green. Okay, so still kind of that same order, kind of similar percentages a little bit, but blue at about 53%, red 31, green 19. So appreciate that. We'll go back to Ben to keep us going here.
I just want to know if there's a correlation between favorite color and,
Well,
scenario.
I was wondering if it's the order that I read them in, if there's a, that
Oh, blue, okay, yeah. That's
first thing they heard,
All right, so we're going to dive into that community risk score first. Again, this is that combination of the flooding score, the Main Street candidate score and the crash score. And I'll just point out a few things here. First, on the left here, we're looking at the 3 different mitigation strategies and the results. As compared to, this is all looking at our standard land use allocation with mitigation compared to our standard land use allocation with nothing, no new mitigation. So the direction we want our mitigation options to go is left, go negative, because it would decrease our risk score. So we're saying here that red actually increases risk a little bit relative to the doing nothing at all. And the green and the blue decrease the community risk. The green is the favorite in this circumstance, so a little, significant enough over the blue. I'm going to go into a little bit more detail on that, but I'll show you how this kind of pans out on the map, which I think helps somewhat. So on the map, we've got our study boundaries with the arrows on either end with blue arrows. We've got this risk, community risk, where the thinner brown lines say that there's some risk. The biggest brown lines are saying that's the most risk in those segments. And then if you are just seeing that gray, it just means that we're not seeing necessarily any risk there. Doesn't mean that. And this is the scenario we're looking at here is doing nothing, right? This is what we were comparing to when we were looking at the prior chart. And I'll just walk you through some highlights on each corridor just to orient you. First is that, the fact that we are detecting with this community risk score that there is a, thicker, higher risk area along 16 through Milton, where we, have this Main Street concept that we want to, that people have identified there. So that's a real risk identified in the data. We also have just sort of a mid-level, I'd say, across 9 through the study area of risk level on the community front. And then varying levels, sometimes pretty high, sometimes pretty low along the 24. Then when we look at implementing, modeling what implementation of these strategies look like, we're starting with the blue. So that, again, it's got the Main Street, the couple different connectors, and the widening the shorter widening on 24. And I'll just point out again, kind of going through the same sequence. We don't see that thick line anymore on 16. So that Main Street treatment we see, is doing its job and decreasing the community risk there. We have on 9 pretty much no change, still that sort of smooth mid-level risk amount. But not sure if I'm missing one, but okay, I'll just say on 24 that we don't really see much change at all there either. Okay. Oh, sorry. In this comment too, I'm pointing out the fact that 9C, you can see a risk level there. It's not huge, but we are actually adding risk where there wasn't risk before by adding a new, facility that we're encouraging people to go. So, and that's, you could say the same for the 16C long up top. Risk, community risk added, and not much decreasing along the borders except for that Main Street treatment.
Question?
Yeah.
Does this data vary by seasonal traffic?
So this is looking at seasonal conditions.
Is this summer?
This is summer, yeah, which is what we've done for most of the results, is to kind of look at worst case summer
Worst case.
conditions. Certain things like flooding may not be, so seasonal, but the traffic is seasonal. Going to the red strategy, again, with that diagonal route folks were interested in, and the longer widening along 24, the Main Street concept. Again, the Main Street concept is effective. Community risk along 9 remains steady, unchanged. The risk along that connector route is, added in now. We've got the community risk added with that. And the, little change along the 24 corridor. Moving into the green, where we've got the shorter northern connector for 16 and short widening for 9 and short widening for 24. Here, that effective Main Street concept, the no real change on the 9 corridor. We introduced some risk on that northern 16C short route, and we have a little change on the 24 route.
And just a reminder, because we're maybe about halfway through our slides, if you're a member of the monitoring committee or the TAG, if you'd like to ask a question or make a comment, just raise your hand and we'll see that and we'll let you in, obviously, if you're in the room. And if you are a member of the public joining us, we ask that you wait till the end. There will be an opportunity for public comment at the end.
And I'll add too, it is a little bit difficult to discern movement between slides sometimes. So Ben has a good slide at the end of each kind of series of maps that summarizes the takeaways, things to learn about what was just presented.
Yeah, so just returning back to this chart we saw before, again, this is looking at the standard land use conditions compared to standard land use without any mitigation. And then this next one is getting a little more complex. Note the change in the key here. But remember, we are looking at varying land use conditions that we can evaluate too, and what works well and doesn't with these different risk scores. So when we've got the more intense colors, we've got compact represented, where we've got the middle of the range, that's our standard, and that's the lightest is our sprawl. And so there's different shades of the blue, green, and red in this chart here. And so you can see that even between the prior chart and this one, which was just showing the middle standard, this is showing all of them. We do get some variations with our results by land use. And I'll just point out just one takeaway here is just that, especially with some of the land use scenarios, we can see that there's this phenomenon of the added risk when you introduce a new connector route that I think is playing into why there's not a lot of change, because it kind of, the net change decreases, or sometimes it's getting more risky. It's getting in positive territory relative to doing nothing. So interesting takeaways, I think, on that front.
Can you pause there, Ben? So
Yep.
this is complicated. I know I had to look at it like 10 times before I got it. So I want to sit with this a moment because we'll be revisiting this format when we come back. So now, obviously, this gets back to, multiple responsibilities of multiple folks, right? DelDOT is not going to be able to do anything to change land use, whether it's compact, what we've been doing, or sprawl. But I know many of you in the room who work for municipalities who do have a comprehensive plan and make zoning changes all the time. This is some data inputs you may contemplate. And I know we have the county on the line here as well with their comp plan about to start. And this is some data that they could integrate into comprehensive planning efforts. And I was very surprised to see that, the green scenario, depending on if you're looking at compact, standard, or sprawl, may be advantageous or disadvantageous. To me, I would think, they're all going to be a little better, but to see that change was surprising. So I think there's some interesting takeaways here that hopefully will contribute to decision-making moving forward.
Yeah, and again, this is high-level scoring. It can't predict everything, but I think it just gives some interesting things to contemplate. When we get into the corridor level studies, we're going to be able to look at these different metrics in more detail and look at new things that come up along the way that we want to explore. But it gives a good, interesting overview of how this system performs. So again, on the community score front, we're just seeing that the strategies don't really move the needle much, with the exception of that Main Street treatment. It's good to see that that's confirming that the conditions improve. And then again, these new roads can really create new risks. We're sending cars through places that maybe didn't have them before, or have them, but not to the level of volume and speeds and things, which can add safety concerns, etc. So there's some things to weigh. There's always trade-offs. It's essentially a lot of our message throughout this whole analysis. We're going to move on to the capacities risk score next. So kind of a similar treatment as we cycle through here. This you can see just looking at the standard land use to standard land use. When we introduce the mitigation on all fronts, they seem to be more significantly moving the needle. We see that the red is least impactful, least keeps decreasing the risk, but the green is highest, but blue is a close second. So that's the overview of the standard land use allocation. This is looking at that, how things exist on this capacity score without doing anything in the system. And again, now we're kind of in the purple lines, but thicker is going to be most risk, and thinner will be less risk. And along 16, you can see that there's very few capacity issues other than the western area into Ellendale along the study area. Along 9, we certainly have some thicker lines pretty consistently through, kind of starting on the east side where that CTP project widening ends, and then carrying all the way to Park Avenue and maybe finishing a little bit there. The 24 corridor is kind of similar to the community score, like highs and lows, but throughout the corridor. And then applying that blue strategy with these various different concepts for mitigation, we see some improvements to these different corridors on the capacity score. So not much to change from on 16, so 16 doesn't change much. The thicker lines, a few of the thicker lines on 9 have diminished, and we're getting some capacity issues on the new connector. So again, sort of introducing risk where it wasn't before, but that could be something that you could even explore going from 2 lanes to 4 lanes, like we did on the diagonal one. But we're seeing that it does pull capacity concerns from 9 to some extent. And I'll just say too, and this kind of gets to Dick's comment or question before, is that even on facilities that we're not directly talking about, like 9 or these connector routes, leading to this connector route we see on 30, this section that gets wider for capacity concerns, because now that this is an attractive route to go, people that took a different route before may be heading toward or out of that connector route on 30 and creating capacity risk that was smaller before in certain spots. So it's a little bit of that whack-a-mole effect. And then finally for 24, this seems to resolve much of the issues for capacity risk on 24 in that, for the extent that widening is the shorter run. Then to the red strategies, we've got just similar results on 16, similar reduction of risk on 9 in some spots, and similar sort of introduction of some risk on the connector route, but this one, I think because it's got the 4 lanes, it seems to handle the traffic risk better than the 9C that we just saw in this scenario. And finally, the long route of widening on 24 similarly does an effective job on the capacity risk reduction, just for a longer stretch. And then green, this is more focused on the 2 widenings on the 2 lower routes. Scene doesn't change. Again, this is the one that reduces risk on 9 the most, the widening of 9. And we don't have the increase that we do for adding adding a connector that those connector strategies introduced. And finally, the widening on 24 is effective. Back to this, simpler standard land use only comparison on the charts, and then looking at our more nuance of different land use scenarios. And this one, I think you can see, interestingly, that while the blue was sort of a close second on the standard, the compact blue really winds up being the winner overall of reducing the most risk on the capacity level, more so than the green. But the compact green is goes behind as well. So again, green and blue are showing some promise as strategies for capacity risk reduction. We've got the Main Street is effective, it's not increasing capacity risks, so that's good. And I will say that we did once do a preliminary run on 16 without any connector routes that would take through traffic around it, and that maybe worsened a little bit on the capacity end, but not very significantly at all.
Yeah, so essentially you would not have to pair the Main Street improvements on 16 with parallel route. From a resource perspective, good news.
Yes. And potentially a community risk, I think would be lessened by not going that route. This is saying.
It's interesting, at least to me, is that looking at the 3 routes that we're exploring here, 16, Route 9, and 24. Route 9 is probably, I hope you agree, is more likely to carry a lot more commuter traffic than it is than the other 2. If you drive down that road in the morning, it's just basically bumper to bumper, and it's all commuter traffic, business traffic.
Yeah, I think that, makes sense as far as probably a significant amount of,
And that's independent of the season.
Georgetown employment and things seat of government things, yeah. And then, again, when we do introduce the new roads, they can kind of diminish the risk in some spots, but they also can add that risk in a new spot where it wasn't before. So something away there. And then the widenings appear generally to be the most effective for reducing capacity risk, although, you know, that diagonal blue with the you know, the compact land use seem to actually win out. So more to explore there with the greens and the blues. The compact really seem to add some benefit on capacity. Okay, that's it for the mapping part. So hopefully you followed that. Appreciate your patience on kind of dissecting this with me. There are a few more charts I want to go into, and this kind of gives the accessibility, again, kind of a theme toward compact developments, showing benefits, and this a notion of kind of preservation pairing with capacity changes. So into that a little bit here. So a lot on this slide, I don't know at once, but I'll walk you through it. So we look at auto accessibility to things like hospitals and how, you know, many hospitals could you reach essentially within 15 minutes from various places all throughout the county. How many jobs can you reach in 15 minutes? We also have, you know, 30 minutes down the lower run here. We kind of faded that out for hospitals just because I don't think anyone really cares whether you can get to a hospital in 30 minutes as much as 15 minutes. Jobs, it might be relevant for both, although we, you know, probably would love the job that is within 15 minutes. But 30 is passable probably. And I think as we get into things like accessibility for freight centers and thinking about goods movements and getting our packages and all the things that need to happen logistically, 30 is probably a more suitable time frame. And with leisure and hospitality centers, looking at where our tourist economy probably wants to travel. Those are other spots that we looked at, and we kept it a little bit more in the 30 time frame. But all these, if they go left, they're gonna, and almost all of them do, they're gonna sort of improve accessibility, decrease the risk that you can't get some place faster. So it's interesting that this one seems to be strongly in favor of the green mitigation strategy. It also seems to very consistently do the you know, favoring for compact development. So you know, if you're in a compact, it kind of makes sense, right? If you've got density around you, you've probably got a lot of things close by that you can get to meet some of your different needs. So your trips are going to be shorter. Similarly, too, if there's not a lot, you know, to get through in between some of the longer ones, then your trips are going to be shorter time. But yeah, so that works well together. This is essentially what I'd say about compact and accessibility. Green seems to win out pretty well there. I think it's time for another poll.
Okay, great. So what we're going to do, there's a couple questions here. So the first one is, how close do you live to your job during typical traffic conditions? If you're no longer working, maybe just how long you used to live near your job during typical traffic conditions. Just trying to get a sense of within 15 minutes, within 30 minutes, or longer than 30 minutes.
If I walk to my job,
How long do you think?
10 minutes.
That would
Nice.
be within 15 minutes.
Okay, so kind of a pretty even split here. Well, there we go. I don't know where that other 1% is, but you know. All right, well,
What I've seen, that seems to stack up with wider their data where people travel. People tolerate driving longer distances for work than they do for going to the grocery store.
Yeah. So again, pretty even split. We just had one more response, which threw it off a little bit, but pretty even. And then how often does traffic, go to our next question, how often does traffic increase the time it takes for you to commute to and from work? So how much is your commute affected by traffic? Never? I want to know who that person is. Rarely, so a few times a month, occasionally, at least once a week, frequently, multiple times a week. So as we heard in the room, we do have a walker, so that's maybe where the never comes from, if you're walking or biking. Maybe if you're virtual.
My first planning job, I lived in a townhouse across the street from the county planning department. And I would always kid that, traffic was my biggest issue. It's like, was there a break so I could just cross one?
So we have 4 categories. Ben, you may need to scroll for me here, but 25% never, 19% rarely, a few times a month, 13% occasionally, or at least once a week. And then I can't see my last.
Oh, I can go over it. Okay. It's really weird when I get over here, but I am gonna.
Well, we could probably just do the math, but I was told there wouldn't be any math on this. There we go.
Wow.
44% said frequently, multiple times a week.
Bury the lead.
I thought the biggest would jump to the top. All right.
Okay, moving on.
Andrew.
I think there's some issue with accumulation in answering questions like that, because there are different parts of your commute, give or take, I don't work anymore, that are less intense than other parts of your commute. So the intensity is function of how the capacity of your fellow workers are actually getting to work and what impeding them as they go through that process. Just thought.
Okay. Okay, so kind of getting back or further into this theme of the compact growth and things, turning to the state strategies, which is the strategies for state policies, spending, often just referred to as state strategies. Many of you may be aware of this sort of levels map, where we've got the red number 1, level 1 in more developed areas, down to the level 4 being more rural areas, and grays being our off-limit areas of protected land, sensitive land, etc. And this is something that OSPC does. This is the 2020 version. They're working on their 2025 right now and finalizing that. But it's referred to in the Coastal Corridors report. And an important thing I think to think about as we look at these corridors, and especially when you're looking at 9, going through some, a lot of that white level 4 area. And this, the level 4 areas are really designated for agriculture, for protection of natural and cultural resources and open space activities. So, and this has come up a number of times. I think Scott chimed in a little bit earlier about concern about sprawl. Sometimes when you add capacity, you add accessibility, you wind up with people moving further out because, it doesn't take as much time anymore. And so I could move out further away. Maybe it's a little cheaper out there and they choose that spot. But it in the process, creates this demand for development. And so as we look at these capacity measures to improve that capacity score, I think it's important to also be thinking about what role, what should be thought about for particularly level 4 areas of the county. And it may be that, you know, when anything that is adding capacity is proposed, we may want to look at pairing that with some preservation, you know, built nearby in level 4 areas along the and then just generally too, that compact land use is, you know, well, serviced by the preservation. So if you do preservation of some land, then that means that you're gonna kind of create a little bit more density in other areas. And, but it also can mitigate that congestion and accessibility issue. So again, kind of supporting that state strategies concept, but also just something we want to think about as we look at either the connector routes or the widenings, how much, you know, should, along with looking at the roadway and the things we look at using the preservation aspects of things.
I have a question.
Yes.
Steep reading.
Steep reading, Sussex County Farm Bureau, but like looking at the 16 connector, whether you use a long or short, doesn't really matter.
Okay.
On the east or on the west side of town, on the gray, I know that's either preserved farmland or preserved forest land. So how can you legally go through there if that's preserved farmland?
Right. So that, you know, that's why it's gray is off limits for development, right? And I think that essentially when we were looking at the routes, I don't think it's necessarily off limits for infrastructure, but I would also say that it's not something that we're looking at necessarily to suggest that this is a good idea or that it will happen. It's essentially just saying, what if we had this route? And I totally
I would
agree.
respectfully challenge you on whether you are allowed to, because if I own that piece of ground that's preserved, I can't build a road on it. So the state's allowed to build a road on my ground?
And I'm,
Yeah,
don't quote me on
and
it,
that's
it's not my
respectful, yeah.
knowledge area on how that
But
all works. I'm not sure if we have anyone in the room on
But
that.
I think what, you know, having the different strategies up there, whether it's a widening or what have you, it's to give comparison, it's to try to move the conversation forward. There's a lot of resources out there, not just protected farmland, other resources that, you know, we would not probably be able to do something with. So we're just several steps before we're kind of getting into that. But those are very much the issues that we will eventually have to confront. But we're just not ready to do that right now.
Yeah.
I mean, I think this now becomes our third or fourth, you know, just if anyone joined us late and are seeing any of the different maps that we have or anything that was sent you, these are as conceptual as you can get. This is just our, you know, way of just putting some ideas out there to kind of start the conversation, to start being able to see how things compare. These are not projects. These are not, you know, anything with any kind of finality or anything like that. So just a reminder to anyone who may have joined us late.
Yeah. And I think that generally there, you know, the concept is to try to get on the other side of 30 to the other side of 5 in any of those and avoid that Main Street area. But yeah, I think it shows how, you know, if it were to happen, it would be, people would be upset probably at it. And that's partly why we're seeing added community risk in that scoring, is that we are acknowledging that it's not without controversy, not without, you know, trade-offs, et cetera. And it's just a concept that's just to explore what happens. I think that was it for that piece. Just on the takeaways here again, just that the green strategy was, you know, strong on the accessibility. The compact really showed consistently as improver of auto accessibility. I will say that, you know, it's known to be a improver of non-motorized accessibility as well. It's not something we're looking at in this analysis. And then probably a good look at level 4 areas and preservation pairing with capacity concepts would be So on cost is the final sort of analysis or metric that we looked at. And here we have the map on the left just shows everything that we had as candidates. I will point out, you may have noticed that only one of these didn't get into one of the three scenarios, was the longer of the routes on 9. That was largely due to the fact that it was the longest widening and most expensive. And we just wanted to kind of keep these to be, potential concepts that are a little bit more on the affordable end, and that was the one that I would into the scenarios. But overall, the most expensive was the red, which had that diagonal, which was also a 4-lane, so that increases that cost. That's the bulk of it. All of them sort of have that base of the Main Street, and the red had the longer of the 2 widenings on 24. So that's why costs are driven up quite a bit with that one. Green was the winner as least expensive. And these are just estimates, and these numbers are solid by the time you get built. I'm sure inflation and different construction costs would need to be recalculated, et cetera. Some of this gets into land acquisition, a lot of different considerations, but it doesn't get at everything. Just to give us a ballpark of comparison here. And blue is somewhere in the middle. And I'll just say too that, so our range is 350 million to 450 million-ish. And just by context, the capital, the CTP capital budget for 2026 fiscal year is more than that, but a ton more than that. That's 665 billion. And it seems like green is the winner on the cost. So with that, I'm going to hand it back to our friend Leah. But I would be happy to take any questions. We'll sit back down.
There's a question from George Cardwell online. George, you can unmute yourself and speak.
Hey, George.
You're still muted. Give me a second to make sure. You should be able to unmute yourself.
There we go. Yeah, I think I finally pushed the right number of buttons. The 450, of course, that's an estimate for the entire project. That's planning, preliminary engineering, environmental assessment, right-of-way acquisition, construction. I'm realizing all these numbers are pretty lumpy, but that's still, in the best of scenarios, the money shows up all the time. That's a 10 to 15 year project. So for the 450 number, it's really, if you're going to compare it to the annual budget for the CTP, it's really a more like 30 or 40 million versus the 450.
Yeah, and just so we're clear, we're saying 3 different concepts made into projects if it ever went that way. But yeah, so it's not just one thing, it would be across 3 different corridors, but it's significant, for sure.
And I'll add too, we phase out all of our projects already anyway, right? So
yeah, I'm just trying to think how you do the maintenance of traffic if you're going to attack 3 quarters simultaneously.
Right.
That'll be interesting.
Things would be envisioned that way, and I think again it's a good caveat too to say that this is just a concept of a bundle of things together.
Sure.
Even if we say green is the least costly and it's good for this accessibility or that other measure, it's not something we're saying, okay, well, let's do these 3 things at all. Nothing needs to go forward that keeps those 3 intact.
Mm-hmm.
But thanks, George.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, and that's part of why all these maps too, remember, this isn't as if these were built tomorrow. This is looking at 2050. So
right.
we're baking into the analysis that, knowledge that it's going to take time. And for those of you who have been around a long time, Andrew, I'm looking at
No.
you.
I'm trying to, that door locked behind, I'm trying to get someone.
Andrew, I always call on you for this. When did the 113 study get done?
When did it, well, it started in 2003, and I think we probably had our final approvals in 08 or somewhere around there, so.
Planning in 03, approvals in 08, and when are 113 improvements getting constructed? Right now, and some of them aren't
Still
even
ongoing.
codes out yet. So that's, you know, it's a decades-long process here, and we are at the front end of that process. But the need isn't manifesting yet.
And you know, the importance of, you know, one could look at that and go, gosh, you know, why does it take so long? The flip side of looking at it is you plan so that you can preserve the space for when you're ready and you have the funding. If you just wait till you have funding, or if you wait until there's the absolute need, you may have lost all of your options to actually do the work that you want to do. So getting it planned early so that you can preserve space is really the key ingredient to being able to then move forward.
The state of Maryland preserved those farmland on 404 in the 60s. They built that ground way back in the 60s.
Yeah, if you ever drive, you know, before they expanded it, you would drive down and you would see where the telephone poles were, and they were way off the roadway. So, all right, Lee, why don't you keep going here?
So we could have just included this one slide and spoken to this, but this chart is our attempt to kind of aggregate everything Ben just shared in one place. Okay, so it looks at what we talked about earlier. It looks at our capacity theme, our community theme, and then cost. And also our accessibility to hospitals, jobs, freight centers, leisure and hospitality centers for each category for blue, red, and green. So you'll see there over all of the measures, and again, for the standard land use results, and not considering compact or sprawl, green is ranking first for Rita, you know, give medals out with some nuance. So you'll note, so first look at the numbers. So broadly, green ranks first for most, blue for second, and red is third. And then there's some caveats there. So there is the bolded C. That means that compact performs best among all strategies. So we're the county, or to pursue a more compact growth strategy, perhaps it would make sense to contemplate the blue collection of projects a little more. Conversely, if you see a non-bolded C, it might work a little more for the specified strategy, a little better, or a S, the sprawl actually performs better than the standard for that particular strategy. So there's a lot of nuance. There's no one clear-cut, dry answer to any of this. And as Ben just said, we're not at the point yet where we're crowning the winner and saying, okay, we're going to run with this. You're our first stop, actually. This set of information is going to be shared further amongst leadership here at DelDOT. I'm sure future meetings are in the cards with our partners at Office of State Planning and Sussex County, and the general public in a couple of weeks at our workshop. Because again, these are not decisions that we make hastily. They need a lot of thought, a lot of wrapping our heads around the pros and cons of all. So, revisiting our first pair of questions.
So two final poll questions. You're very similar to what we asked at the beginning when we said what you might be interested in. Now we'd like to kind of get your sense of what you think we should explore further. So which regional connector mitigation concept should we explore further? Rank these 1 to 4. So 16C short, so the SR16 shorter northern connector, the SR16 longer northern connector, US 9 connector that avoids US 9 and SR 5 constraints, and the SR 16 southern connector that avoids 16 Main Street.
Your answer here could be, I still want to know more about that one thing. I wasn't satisfied with what you all talked about today.
Why am I not seeing anything?
It takes time.
There we go.
Patience.
I'm clearly a product of the modern generation. I expect instant information. Even a 5-second pause drives me crazy. All right, so we're seeing the US 9 connector that avoids US 9 and SR 5 constraints right now. First, we've got, oh, wait, maybe I should wait a couple seconds here. Wow, that just went to third, just like that. All right, we're gonna wait a couple seconds here as these things change around a little bit. Okay, so the US 9 connector, the one that avoids US 9 and SR5 constraints first, the SR16 longer northern connector, then the SR16 shorter northern connector, and then the SR16 southern connector that avoids 16 Main Street. That's the order that people felt like we should explore further. Why don't we move on to our final poll question, which is now focusing on the widening mitigation. Again, ranking these, you've got US 9 widening to Park Avenue, US 9 shorter widening to SR5, SR24 longer widening to Oak Orchard, and SR24 shorter widening to Indian Mission. Wait a few seconds here and okay, so the well,
Every time you start.
I know.
Pulling the rug out.
Okay, so we have the SR24 longer widening to Oak Orchard, then the two US 9 options, first to Park Avenue, then to SR5, shorter widening to SR5, and then the SR24 shorter widening to Indian Mission. So again, all these poll questions could not be further from being scientific. This is just a reflection of the people who took the time to join us today, where their attitudes lie, and that is helpful because, as Leah said, you are kind of our first impression for all this information, and so it's helpful. But I don't want to, read too much into it. We don't have the entire county represented here. We have a few people. So, but with that, turn it back to Leah, and we're going to start kind of wrapping up the meeting.
So just to summarize where we've been, we know that only focusing on the ideas we brought forth today are not going to solve all the problems. As Ben noted, we may do the suite of improvements throughout the county, and we're still going to see capacity issues, crash issues, concerns with speeding and safety, right? This is not a one size fits all. It's not the silver bullet. That's the better metaphor I was going for. We're going to have to pair any of these roadway improvements with policy changes, with good enforcement from our partners at state police, with potential land use and zoning reform at the county and municipal level. So all of this works together, and we do hope that this tool that we've shared with you today can continue to be used to help inform decision making moving forward. We've talked about the fact that new roads, while alleviating some of our problems, can also introduce new risks. You ask for more cars in one place, you're going to see more crashes. That's just the nature of things. And we also know that adding those new roads or increasing capacity can induce development. And, given that induced development might get us right back to where we started, we want to be very deliberate about ensuring that steps are taken potentially to preserve space, whether it's through, Steve, you mentioned Agland's preservation program. There's a number of other opportunities to kind of look at how we can make sure we're protecting our open space, which also protects our road performance. And we know our compact development scenario was better for auto accessibility and also better for people walking and biking. If you have more destinations within 3 miles of you, that gives you more options in how you can get to those destinations, right? So there we go. Preservation is preventative care. Those level 4 areas, and again, those maps we shared, the kind of red, orange, yellow ones from Office of State Planning Coordination, those are going to be updated in the coming months. So there will be a more current version of those coming out just for your edification. And finally, our cost estimates. We have a pretty big range, and cost is important. We can't venture into this acting like the bottom line doesn't matter. We need to be good stewards of taxpayer dollars while maintaining mobility for the folks who like to live and work here. Mobility and accessibility. So tonight we talked about 3 different combinations, our red, blue, and green scenarios. Obviously, we could package and bundle these in a number of different ways. I didn't know the permutations, but I'm sure it's quite a few. So that is something we'll still continue to take a look at. But also, despite all of the great data we saw tonight, our tools have limits. They're not 100%. They're not wholly predictive. They're the best we can do. And it is valuable data. We have to make decisions on something. And also, it's not accounting for those other modes that are very important for our solution. So, we are learning and applying new techniques, new methodologies as we continue this process. And again, we hope this tool will continue to be used moving forward. So we do not get a vicious cycle. So I wanted to return to this slide briefly to, again, tonight we talked about mitigation concepts that may one day turn into projects. We shall see. But that policy, program, and partnerships piece is also going to be a really important part of the solution. So I think we still have 15 minutes before meeting ends.
Yeah, so in terms of, we've kind of wrapped up. Austin will kind of close us out at the end, but any last comments, questions? We put a couple discussion questions up on the board, but really anything that any of our monitoring committee members or TAG members want to ask us or put out there before we wrap up? Anything that surprised you about the results that we presented? Anything you feel really strongly about in terms of the strategies? Actually, Steve, you brought up one of the challenges. There are too many challenges to list. I mean, these types of efforts are full of challenges. So, okay, well, I'm not going to prolong that any more than we have to. I'm not seeing anyone online jumping in or anyone in the room. But there's, as we've all said, we're in the beginning. There's going to be a lot of challenges along the way that we're going to have to move forward with. But one of the things that Leah brought up, the 113 effort that started a long time ago. Well, at those same times, there were efforts to do something maybe similarly in the western, looking east-west in Sussex County, and almost all the times, kind of DelDOT was said, we're in kind words, go away. Kind of, we're not ready for you all to take this on. Well, one of the real positives of kind of the coastal corridor efforts has been, even though we're not at any point of saying we're going to do X or Y or Z, there is a general sense from people of this is a worthwhile effort to look at. This is a worthwhile effort to study. Let's see where this might go, because there are concerns about kind of the east-west traffic getting through the county. And so the fact that we're here, we've had 2 stakeholder meetings, we're moving on to a public workshop is important steps, even though we're very early in this effort. So, Andrea, yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out, there is a comment in the chat, so if you could take a look at that.
So, what did you say?
I got one comment.
There's another hand up.
Okay. Dara? If you want to unmute and come on.
Sure. One of the things that Sussex County lacks is a grid system, and anything that this effort can do to enhance what little of that grid system exists is going to have long-term positive effects on circulation. There's a reason that grid systems are pretty universal in terms of moving people and traffic and freight and everything else around. So that has always been, the thing I keep coming back to, looking at the rural counties in Delaware, is that it is virtually impossible to find anything that resembles a grid. These roads are, they developed pretty much connecting major farms to major markets to a few rail hubs, and we just don't have a working grid system. And the it's wetlands and waterways that affect that too, especially in the southern part of the state. So it's not it's not lack of planning, but it is lack of planning.
Good, thank you for that comment. We've got a comment from Council.
Yeah, I can go ahead and read it. It's from Councilwoman Meredith with Town of Milton. Statement was not a question, more explanation of the land use scenarios for the workshop will be helpful for the public. A short explanation of the state investment levels for the workshop will be helpful too for those unfamiliar. And then Councilwoman Meredith also stated that 16/9C is a nightmare scenario for me as a safe streets advocate. A 4-lane roadway cutting through the town of Milton between residential developments and next to middle school. No thanks.
Appreciate that.
Trask, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, well, my usual comment, I can't go by without it. Behind all of these data, and this data is important, it is, and you're planning for it, and I get it. There's still a driver out there that needs to learn how to drive in Delaware. And some kind of a marketing campaign, not necessarily for this group, but some kind of a marketing campaign from DelDOT or somebody needs to go online to get people to understand the results of how they drive on the roads today. I noticed that in the first page where you gave the results of how many are dead, how many got injured, and so on. And there seems to be, this is just my observation, ever since COVID, people don't care anymore. I just don't think they care anymore. Well, they just want to go where they want to go at any rate or any speed they want to go. And something needs to be done to slow these people down or make them more accountable.
Yeah, I'll just add.
That's just mine.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you. I'll add to that. That's where I think, we talk about the policy, the projects, the programs, the partnerships. All of that is baked into the effort. Our partnerships with the state police and the municipal police departments coordinate better with those kinds of things. That's where those efforts really are intertwined with this effort. So
I used to live in Massachusetts, and in Massachusetts, not that they're perfect or anything like that. You need to have your life in your hands when you drive up there, especially in Boston. But at any rate, they put signs along the road that relate to accountability of your driving. So if the road, for instance, goes through a high-density area, they lower the speed limit in that high-density area. So ahead of time as you're driving down the road, there's a high-density area coming up, so the speed limit is going to go down. Not that everybody listens to it, but there are accountability signs posted all over the roads of Massachusetts that remind people about how they drive.
We'll appreciate that comment. And just before we turn it over to Austin to wrap us up, was there any member of the public that joined us online? Was there any other comments that we received or anyone here? Yes, if you could just introduce yourself.
I'm Mary Forsheim from Lewis. And just for my education, I guess, the warning notices on the maps makes perfect sense because you're right, people are going to see it and say, oh my God, or whatever the reaction is going to be. But just for me to understand, at what point does a concept become a planned project in the DelDOT world?
Sure. So Sussex County and DelDOT have an established process to funnel things that come out of our studies as well as public feedback, things that members of the public want to see done, things that elected officials in Sussex County want to see done. The county and the department have a process to coordinate those ideas, those concepts, and then put those forward into the process that we do for ranking and prioritizing things to move forward with our capital transportation program update, which is a 2-year update. We actually just completed an update September, or the public outreach component of the update in September, and are finalizing that information now. So that's the process in Sussex County.
So the utilization of 24 from Love Creek to Indian Mission Road, that's in the CTP. And for the 2732 CTP, there are $3 million allocated starting in 2029 for PD. So at that stage, is that a planned project? Or is that still being looked at because project development could go multiple directions?
That's a good question. I don't know if I have a definitive answer right now on that. If there's funding assigned to it in the capital transportation program, that means our department engineers are understanding what are the constraints, what could that project look like? How does that project, what does it look like for that project to move forward? So a lot of times it is the results from this work that are supposed to be very high level, very conceptual, that funnel into our engineers to determine how can those ideas actually work on the ground.
Part of the reason, if I may, Austin, for those of you who've been following along with the coastal corridors thing, we weren't looking at 24 as part of coastal corridors. We were looking at 9 and 16. So we do some oversimplification of messaging there's a lot of nuance underneath. So thank you for raising this particular point. 24 is in the CTP, and part of what we wanted to make sure was looking at this more holistically, right? So we wanted to make some assumptions and provide some more inputs to Project Development South as they are beginning to wrap their hands around what 24 widening impacts and benefits are, along with these other improvements that may happen within the network. So I know one question is how far should the widening extend? How far will it be beneficial and not? So that is part of why that's wound up. So yes, technically we can call that one a project. It's in the CTP. You're very familiar with that piece of it, but part of our effort here was kind of looking at it holistically with the other east-west pieces. So thanks for raising that issue.
And I'll just add a little bit more onto that is that we do have on our call right now staff from DelDOT's environmental section, because the next step of this is to determine what are those environmental constraints. And so that's where we link the planning and the environmental aspects. It's literally called planning and environmental linkages as the next step of this. So I'm glad that we have those staff online because that's a valuable part of moving these things forward.
And with 100% certainty, there would be significant public involvement as these things move forward and very conceptual things start to get into alternatives and start looking at that with the environmental groups and everyone. There will be a lot of public involvement to make sure everyone has a chance to engage in that process. All right, I'm going to, we've got 5 minutes left in our allotted time. I'm going to turn it over. Oh, did we get another comment?
Sorry, I called you out, Anna. Did you want to make any other comments?
Yeah, you kind of called me out. My name is Anna Smith. I am the Environmental Stewardship Manager here at DelDOT. And as Austin said, when it gets, the project will come to us, it will go through a full review for as part of the NEPA process, depending on the funding. If it is a federal funded project, it will go through all things NEPA with public workshops as being part of that process. It will be looked at for wetlands and water impacts, as well as cultural resource impacts, as well as the human and environment capacity of it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Next steps.
Very good. Sorry. All right, well, thank you everyone for some great conversation and analysis. Appreciate all your input with what we looked at this evening. In terms of next steps and timeline, you can see that we're moving from the regional and higher level analysis to a more specific corridor-oriented analysis. First thing we'll do is take this process, document it, commemorate it, and put it into a package that we can then share with both the county and the Office of State Planning Coordination, probably some other groups of folks that we would want to have as partners moving forward in the corridor-specific work coming forward. The next date that you should have on your calendars is December 2nd. We're going to be in the Georgetown Middle School for our next public workshop as part of the Coastal Corridors study. Hope to see you all there.
Okay, if I could just add a little bit onto that, Steve, so for that public workshop, it starts at 4:30. Some of our workshops or / open houses, we kind of will say, show up anytime in that time and, just walk around, whatever. This one will be more of a workshop format where we will have a formal presentation at 4:30, and then we'll flow from there into having our display boards where you can walk around. But if you can't get there at 4:30, still worthwhile to come. But if you're going to show up at 4:45 or 4:50, show up at 4:30, get the benefit of the presentation, and then go into the cafeteria where we'll have the display boards. We'll get you all information on this that we hope you can share with again, you're all here representing different people, different groups. We want to get as many people out there as we can. And just an FYI that if in the unlikely event we get a snow event on December 2nd, we do have a snow date on December 4th. So, but the meeting is December 2nd.
That's right. All right, Andrew, unless you have anything else, anybody from the rest of the team, I believe we are at the end.
Steve, you got us out here at 4:59. I mean, you brought the ship in.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Appreciate you coming in room and online. Thank you, everyone.